order. Just to be clear for all the students, we convened the meeting earlier. We did not have a quorum. We had taken some votes. We nullified those votes. No action was taken. We did call the meeting to order. We did the Pledge of Allegiance, some welcome and introductions, which we will not go back through. At this time, I'll ask Ms. Scott to certify potential quorum.
Town of Ashland, Mr. Hodges.
Here.
Charles City County, Mr. Atkins.
Present.
Chesterfield County, Mr. Carroll.
I'm here.
Goochland County, Mr. Spoonhour.
Here.
Mr. Winfrey.
Here.
Hanover County, Chair Davis.
Here.
Henrico County, Reverend Nelson.
Here.
New Kent County, Mr. Moyer.
Here.
Powhatan County, Mr. McClung. Mr. Kenny. City of Richmond, Mayor Stoney.
Here.
Virginia House of Delegates, Delegate Cousins.
Here.
Senate of Virginia, Senator Hashmi.
Here.
Commonwealth Transportation Board, Mr. Davis.
Here.
Capital Region Airport Commission, Mr. Miller.
Present.
GRTC, Ms. Adams. Here. RMTA, Ms. Dean. Here. DRPT, Ms. Dubinsky. Here. VDOT, Mr. Totten.
Here.
Mr. Riblett.
Here.
And Virginia Port Authority, Ms. Nelson. Thank you. That concludes the roll call for attendance. We do have a quorum.
Mr. Chair, Mr. Winfrey's here as well.
I did call, did I call?
You
I called
did.
Mr. Winfrey.
Very well, let the record reflect that we do have a quorum. I've approved a request for Ms. Nelson to participate remotely from her principal residence, which is in a location more than 60 miles from this meeting location. Ms. Nelson, can you hear us, ma'am?
Yes, I can.
Okay, we can all hear Ms. Nelson. If there's no objection, is there a motion to approve the remote participation of Ms. Nelson?
So moved, Mr. Chairman.
We have a motion, is there a second? We have a motion and a second in discussion. All those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, motion carries. Next item on the agenda is consideration of amendments to the agenda. If you look at item B3, wherein the authority does not have the ability to approve that item, but we can accept that item, so it's just an administrative change, changing the word approve to the word accept. Is there a motion to amend the agenda on B3? With
So
that,
moved.
We have a motion and a second.
Second.
We have a motion and a second in discussion. All those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, motion carries. Item number 3 is proposed approval of CVTA minutes from September 27th, 2024. Have all committee members had an opportunity to review the minutes? Are there any deletions, corrections, or additions? Is there a motion to approve? We have a motion, is there a second? We have a motion and a second, any discussion? All those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, motion carries. Open public comment time. Open public comment time is a time where anyone who wishes to address the authority on any matter within the authority's purview is welcome to come forward. If you do, please state your name, your locality, or the entity that you represent. Is there anyone here who wishes to speak at open public comment time? Seeing none, we will close open public comment time. Chair recognizes Mr. Moyer for comments.
Oh, okay, I mentioned to, Chair Davis that, both him and I and a few other people have attended the VACO meeting this past week. And I was able to be in one of the transportation, classes or group meetings. And one of the things I saw there was it was being, put on by Delegate Austin. And the lack of cooperation that they have in the valley on 81 versus the cooperation we have with the CVTA. They have no idea how to fund anything except through VDOT without being able to leverage the way we have with CVTA funds. And it was, I try to keep the smirk off my face, that what we're doing regionally is so important. And they need some help in that area there. So I appreciate the CVTA and what it's done in the past and for the region.
Thank you, Mr. Moyer. Any further comments from committee members? Seeing none, the CVTA chairman's report, I have nothing on the report. I'm going to immediately go to item number 6, which is the executive director's report. Mr. Parsons.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We have one item listed in the agenda. I do have a couple additional ones that I wanted to share with everyone. But we'll start with 6A. There was a request or a question, I believe it was at our last meeting in September, about the impacts of Hurricane Helene and if there are implications for state funding, whether, things like Smart Scale were impacted by using transportation dollars that are already allocated, if things had to be shifted around to help cover some of the recovery costs. And I did have a conversation with Laura Farmer, the CFO from VDOT, and she was very, very helpful as always. And I'm just gonna read her response to me. Immediate work to restore access and assess conditions continues to be underway since Hurricane Helene. For events like this, VDOT uses financial resources planned for emergencies such as flooding, storms, and snow and ice removal, and monitors spending activity and commitments needed. Simultaneously, we work on what is necessary for potential future federal reimbursement through FEMA, as well as what may be accessed sooner through emergency relief with federal highways. The assessments will help inform the financial impact on VDOT for the remainder of the fiscal year. Additionally, the weather activity in the coming months would also impact funding we have reserved for emergency response. The FY 2025 budget for this response, I believe, is $220 million. Any recommendations for adjustments will be presented to the CTB in the spring if resources from the construction program would be required. It's too early in the event and the year to determine if additional funding would be necessary. And I spoke with Mr. Davis just before the meeting started, and I think we're both of the same mind that it is too early to tell. We need to see what happens with the immediate needs that are raised through that type of recovery effort in the southwest part of the state, as well as any future impacts from traditional winter weather and other types of events that are going to be happening over the next few months. So I think I'll make it a point to stay in touch with VDOT and understand as we move through the next few months what if any impacts we might see on regular transportation dollars.
Thank you very much, and I want to thank Mr. Rex Davis, CTB, for that as well. Thanks for your input, sir. It means a great deal.
So a couple other items, and this is more, I guess, our outward public-facing roles as members of CVTA. The first one is really a bookkeeping issue. Ms. Scott has personal information registers, essentially a handout that every member can use to submit your personal contact information. And we would take instruction from you on whether that can be shared publicly or not. But as we bring online our new website, there will be a member portal so that you all as members can have private access to see things like personal cell phones, home addresses. That has come to bear in the past when somebody has called to ask me, can you give me so-and-so's address? I'd like to send them a card or those types of personal touches. We want to make sure that you have everything you need to be able to stay in touch with each other. And so if you want to share any personal contact information, Ms. Scott is handing out that form now. And we'll be happy to make that update whenever we receive it. Two additional items, and I'm going to share my screen here.
Yeah, I think that's okay.
We are okay. We are in the next week, 2 weeks, we're going to be having two things become public. One is our CVTA impact report. The last time you saw this, we called it an annual report, but I am being realistic that we are not going to have a report every year. So this is an impact report, and it's really going to coincide with each round of regional funding because we want to talk about the impact we're having on the community, right? The projects that are being implemented, the impact of the tax revenues that are being collected. So I just wanted to give you a sneak preview this morning, and I do have a handout that has some more information on it. But we are moving forward with some of the content for that impact report and are working to have this done probably in the next week. I'm working with our team to look back at all the final edits now, but This is just a snapshot of some of the information that we're gonna include there. So we're focusing on 2024, but we're also showing information from all 5 years of the authority's impact on the community. So talking about taxes that have been collected by year and the source of that, whether it's the fuels or the sales and use. The three parts of the pie that we always talk about, the 50% that goes back to localities, that's shown on this slide. We also have additional information in the report about the GRTC contributions as well as the regional fund that has been set aside and how that works. We show splits in the different modes that have been funded through our regional fund. A lot of this report is focusing on that 35% regional fund. But it shows just from FY24, so essentially round 3 of our regional funding cycle as well as lifetime for the authority. And then, so that's just a snapshot. It's probably gonna be about 20 pages total. And I do have a handout that's essentially gonna show you what the layout is. The ultimate draft is going to be a nifty little booklet that's about this size, so that you can be able to have that in your briefcase, in your binder, to be able to share with folks, and we think it's gonna be really great. And I do wanna recognize Kristen Hott in the back of the room, who has been putting in the bulk of the work on this and has done an amazing job in showing some improvement over what we had the last time. Mr. Chair, you can hold for questions. The next item is the CVTA website. That is something that I'm also going to show you just a few screenshots from that, but we're going to be bringing that online slowly over the next week or so, and making sure that all the content is there and accessible for everyone. This is essentially what the front page is going to look like. With all the access is going to be across the top of the page. So you have about the CVTA, a page specifically noted to projects, different resources like our funding allocations, our annual reports, our those types of things, public notices, our meeting calendar, and then member access. There will be separate boxes that are all activated where people can access things like our local spending reports. This corresponds to the locality spending. I've shown you tables of all the different projects that localities have done. We're now going to have this online in a map form so that members of the public can go into their locality and see which projects have been funded locally with CVTA dollars. We also have locality plan spending. So this is the allocations plan, if you remember that, in terms of what is expected to be spent with CVTA local money. Things like the regional prioritization framework, how we prioritize and spend money on projects. All of our documents that are there through the bylaws, our policy guides, financial reporting, the transit governance study that was originally reported through CVTA. A member page for each of you so that people can see who their representative is on the authority, and a brief bio. We also, if you could see across the top, it's a filterable database, so people can look up their authority member and also the membership for the technical advisory committee as well as the finance committee. And that's very easy and seamless to be able to look at all the members. And then the project pages, this is mapping, as I said, for lots of the 3 pie areas of the project allocations. So it's a GIS map that is, you can zoom in, you can click on projects, you can get information about where those projects stand and what the funding has been allocated for those projects. We're very excited about this, and I'm eager to share it with all of you. Please look for, I think we'll probably do a blast public release and a press release about this, but sometime probably towards the end of next week, that'll become public and go live. Mr. Chair, I'd be happy to take any questions, but that's the end of the executive director.
Thank you, Mr. Parsons. Are there any questions or comments on anything presented by Mr. Parsons? I have one comment I want to say about the website. The idea was obviously to make it forward facing, you know, so the public can use it, have access to information. That's priority number one. It was also designed to help authority members. So if you're sitting in a committee, you're sitting in a board meeting, or your staff, for those of y'all who have to run from committee meeting to committee meeting, particularly down at the General Assembly, your staff has easy access to get information to you. So if for some reason you're in there, if you like it, great. We don't need any feedback. If there's an improvement, let us know. But a lot of work was done, so really appreciate Chet's work on that and the entire team. So if there's nothing else, I am going to move around on the agenda just a little bit. I'm going to go over to item C1, the CVTA Finance Committee update, and ask Mr. Spoonhour if he would take over, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for the accommodation. I have a hard stop at 10:30 with us starting late. I just want to make sure we got this in because we had a great meeting on October 9th.
Does that mean the Finance Committee report is going to be 54 minutes?
It could be. It's not something I need to vote me out.
No.
We had a presentation by Christy Choi from PFM talking about our working capital reserve. For those of you that remember, back in July of last year, we said that we wanted to keep some funds in the reserve that were equal to about 3 months of our budgeted our funds, which based on our most recent numbers is about 18 million. In our September 27th meeting, we voted to take 5 million of the invested earnings that we found, the interest that we've got on our investments, and put that towards it. We've also recommended, in order to fund the other 13 million that is necessary, is to continue to take those funds on a monthly basis and put them towards the reserve. Obviously, interest earnings will fluctuate, but estimates are that we would have that fully staffed or fully funded within about 15 months, so about January of 2026. Any feedback on that is welcome. We did want to make sure that because this is a policy, that our approach to fulfilling that would meet our audit standards. So Mr. Parsons is working with PV Mares to ensure that that passes the mustard. Next thing we talked about was the overview of financial reporting. One of the things with one of the first meetings that I chaired, the question was, how do we know we're getting the monies that we should be getting from the state? So Mr. Parsons shared a plethora of reports that really gave us some confidence that we have a good handle on the monies that are coming in from the sales tax and the gas tax. So it was very informative. We also talked about the bond validation process. We heard a presentation from Megan Martz-Gilliland with Kaufman and Knowles on the next steps in the process. We will need a resolution to approve the bond documents so that they're ready for the validation process, and they should be together soon. A couple last two things we talked about are on our agenda today, so I won't go into them, but we did discuss the regional funding deallocation policy, which we'll talk about, as well as the audit report, which is also on today's agenda. That is my report, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. So you've covered item A and B. Any questions for Chairman Spoonhour? Very well, thank you, sir. With that, we'll go into our action items, the CVTA audit report. Mr. Parsons.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Garber from PV Mares is with us virtually, so hopefully everybody can see Mike on the screen. And we wanted to bring an action item to you today to approve the audit report, which is contained in the agenda packet on page 13. The Finance Committee, as Mr. Spoonhour mentioned, heard this report at its last meeting and recommended this action to approve. But I wanted to, Mr. Chair, turn the floor over to Mr. Garber to walk us through the report and answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Garber. Thank you for being with us. The floor is yours, sir.
Thank you, and good morning, Mr. Chair and members of the board. And yeah, Chet, I can tell I'm there because I can see me on that screen behind you all. I am not comfortable taking up half of the TV screen that large, but anyway, Good morning, and thank you for just a few moments. As you both just reported from the Finance Committee, we did meet last month and went through the audit report, management letter, anything of that nature with them in detail. So quickly for your group, because I want to make sure we're done with his finance report by 10:30. We did issue an unmodified opinion on the financial statements. That is the clean opinion. That's the one you're looking for. We did not have any difficulties in performing our audit. Working with different groups, as you know, your finance team is made up of different individuals from across different regions and entities, but they have that down to a seamless transaction and so forth, and recording everything and getting us our information. So the audit went extremely well. And so with that, then we also issued a clean report on compliance as well as internal controls. So there were no findings there either. We did not have any audit entries or past adjustments. We did not have any difficulties performing our procedures. And I think the audit went extremely well again this year. Lastly, I will just end with, I do appreciate you allowing me to join you remotely to do this presentation. I have been on the road quite a bit this week delivering reports. Mr. Davis, I think I saw you earlier just a couple of days ago, and it has been a busy week of delivering reports, and I still have more to go. So I do appreciate you allowing me to do this remotely. With that, I'm happy to answer any questions you may have or address any concerns that you have.
Floor is open for questions. Are there any questions for Mr. Garber? By way of background, PD Mears is under contract with the CVTA. Mr. Garber, thank you. I know you've been on a road show. October 9th, 2024, he was with the Finance Committee, presented the summary of the audit findings. Chair Spoonhour presided over that, and there was a motion by Mayor Stoney, seconded by Supervisor Carroll, at the Finance Committee, and they voted unanimously to recommend full authority approval of the FY24 audit report. If all members had an opportunity to review that report, are there any questions? Any questions for the authority, myself, Executive Director, Mr. Garber, or anyone on the Finance Committee, specifically Chair Spoonhour? Hearing none, Chair recognizes Mr. Spoonhour for a potential motion.
This is coming, as the chair said, from the Finance Committee for full approval.
Very well, there's a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor, we're gonna give you a roll call vote. Please indicate by saying aye. Ms. Scott?
Mr. Hodges?
Aye.
Mr. Atkins?
Aye.
Mr. Carroll?
Aye.
Mr. Spoonhour?
Aye.
Chair Davis?
Aye.
Reverend Nelson? Mr. Moyer?
Aye.
Mayor Stoney?
Aye.
Delegate Cousins?
Aye.
Senator Hashmi?
Aye.
And Mr. Davis?
Aye.
Thank you, that motion carries.
Motion carries. Thank you all for doing that again. Thank you, Mr. Garber. The next item on the agenda is an action item, is our regional funding deallocation policy. If you'll turn to page 65, you'll see that in your packet. I will turn it over to Mr. Parsons. Mr. Parsons.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. As everyone knows, one of the primary roles that the CVTA has taken on since its creation was a leveraging partner with localities to provide essentially match funds or more than match funds to better compete on a statewide or national scale for other grant sources. One of the things that is recognized in our regional project selection and allocation framework is that if a project has leveraged funds applied to it and is not successful for some reason, that it should be considered for a deallocation of those funds so that other worthy projects in the region may take advantage of those leverage dollars which are previously committed. So in response to that notation in the allocation framework, the TAC, the Finance Committee, and staff have been working on a deallocation policy along with our legal counsel that will provide some definition and explanation in terms of what that process might actually resemble if a project got to that point. So the staff report on page 65 provides some background on that, and hopefully you've had a chance to review. But there are essentially multiple opportunities for any project sponsor to take advantage of the leverage funding. The last thing that we ever want to do as an authority is to deallocate funds from a worthy project. But at some point, there may be a need for that consideration to take place. When it gets to that point, now you see there are 4 bullet items listed there. Project estimate may be adjusted for inflation and program forward. The project sponsor may request new amount for leveraging funds. This is all things that can be done to help a project continue to move forward. If the new amount is not included in the CVTA funding scenario, the sponsor can adjust the request or retain the original funding request and try again to achieve additional project funding. And then finally, if the adjusted leveraging amount is approved by the CVTA, the process can be reset. This is all related to a time frame, a 4-year time frame for any leverage project to achieve full funding so that the project may be moved forward. It was originally intended to coincide with 2 rounds of Smart Scale, but TAC has recognized that Smart Scale is not the only way to get a project fully funded. So that adjustment was moved to 4 years rather than 2 rounds of Smart Scale, so that we could use those leverage dollars to apply for federal infrastructure, IIJA funding, or other types of funding that may be available through state or economic or other types of sources. Again, this policy is included. It's very simple. It's 1 page on page 67 that kind of lays out what that process would look like. It has been reviewed by both the TAC and the Finance Committee on October 7th and October 9th. Both committees are recommending full authority approval. The requested action is a motion to approve the regional funding deallocation policy and include it as part of the full CVTA financial policies and procedures. Mr. Chair, I think that's a good summary. I'd be happy to take any questions. This is a little complex to take in.
It is, and I'm gonna ask Mr. Gregory to speak on his input. I wanna be clear, it's simple by design. This is designed for, to lay out a process should this ever have to take place. And it will have a lot of eyes on it. It will go through a very substantial vetting process. It would take full committee, full authority approval to do anything outlined in this potential policy that may be approved today. But I'm gonna turn it over to Mr. Gregory and ask him to speak on his input as he spoke to the Finance Committee. Mr. Gregory.
Yes, sir, Mr. Chair, happy to do that. Thank you. And I believe Mr. Parsons fully addressed the whole process, but the concern, of course, is when a member jurisdiction has a project that they care deeply about, and it goes through these processes and has funding set aside for it or allocated for it, and then it just doesn't get traction. And so you need to have some process to put those funds back in the pot, right? So other projects can get that necessary funding. And so just in order to address the concerns of any member jurisdiction that may find itself in this position with a project, we wanted to build in a process that was respectful of that, but also recognizes that look, this project was in the hopper. It went through the funding process. It's been in the process for over 4 years or more potentially, and it is not getting the traction that it needs. There needs to be a way to pull those funds back. It won't be like an overnight kind of a thing. Obviously, as Mr. Parsons mentioned and described, there will be opportunities for the member jurisdiction who has ownership over the project to seek alternative funding, to defend the rationale for keeping the project with allocated funds. And there'll be multiple steps in that process over the course of months and years. So when we get to a if or when, and this is not necessarily an imperative in any case, but if we were to get to this point on any project, there would be multiple opportunities and steps to be taken before a deallocation decision were ultimately made. So just want to make sure that everybody understands that and appreciates that that there will be a fair process to be followed.
Thank you, Mr. Gregory. Are there any questions, any discussion on this? Yes, sir.
One comment, there has been no check written for any project before this deallocation would happen, correct?
That's correct. The
Okay.
whole.
It's not like you're giving money back.
Right, no. When you allocate funds, they are sort of earmarked, if you will,
Correct.
for a
Okay.
project, but no, until that project, correct me if I'm wrong, until that project is actually funded, those funds are,
Then it goes.
that it sort of it begins, the project begins with, because it has other funding, it's fully funded, you know.
Right.
No actual checks will be written, so it'll all be on paper, as it were, right? If I missed something, or is that fair?
Mr. Winfrey?
I'm assuming we don't have any in the pipeline. I mean, I guess, have we identified anything that may end up in that category that we could monitor?
We're monitoring some projects. There are some projects that have in round 2, I believe, received leveraging funds that were not successful in the last round of Smart Scale. So they're still up to bat for this current round of Smart Scale. So we're looking in the spring to see, hopefully all of those projects will be awarded funds, but that's something we're gonna be keeping an eye on.
Thank you for that. Mr. Carroll?
Some of those projects he's talking about, we actually made changes in the funding allocation. Some of them actually got increased based on how they did in the first round of Smart Scale. So potentially they could do better in this next round of Smart Scale because we added additional funding to them. So we'll just have to see.
And thank you for that. I see 3 likely scenarios, and there certainly could be more. The first and the most obvious is the project just can't move forward. There's not enough funds there, and it's tying up money. And so, let's be clear, that would be a likely scenario. I think the second scenario is additional funding could come in from another source, and somebody says we may not need as many of those CVTA funds, and that would have consequently the same effect. It would free up some of those funds. And then third, one that's not talked about as often, is a locality could come in and decide to essentially self-deallocate and say, hey, something has changed, we've received funding, maybe we're gonna change certain things in the project, the scope, whatever it might be, and say, it could be a self-identifying type of scenario. While that's maybe the least likely, there are three scenarios that comes up, that could come up, where this could potentially be a measure that was taken. But again, having those funds locked up, we've kind of thought 4 years, and great input from all the folks who handled the money, was an opportunity to look at 4 years, 36 months, where do you go? And landing on the 4 years, which gives folks a lot of opportunity. So there would be a tremendous amount of discussion around any of those projects, and any locality where that would be an action that potentially could be taken, would have a substantial amount of input. So thank you all for your hard work, and thank you for that question. That was a great question, Mr. Winfrey, and very much to the point of what we're looking at. So, Mr. Hodges.
I was a little concerned with the language, if the project sponsor is not able to obtain full funding through leverage resources. Sometimes a project is not fully funded, it's very significant in cost. There is a commitment, but there's not, it's gonna take more years to fund it. So at the end of 4 years, you may not be fully funded, is what I'm trying to say. So I'm a little concerned how that would work.
At the end of 4 years, it's not a foregone conclusion, it's not an automatic decision that the funds would be deallocated. The process would allow the question to be asked, should the CVTA deallocate the funds?
It's a flag.
Right, it's a flag, and then the project receives the scrutiny and the review that it deserves, and the sponsor locality would be asked to respond to that. and to be able to say, well, look, we're seeking funding, please keep the project online, keep the funds allocated for reasons A, B, and C, and then the CVTA could respond to that. And that concern was discussed thoroughly during the drafting process, and we wanted to make sure that, that there's nothing predetermined in this process. It's just allowing the scrutiny to be provided for a project if it's gone through several cycles and it's not going anywhere. If it's still going someplace, then I would imagine that the funds wouldn't be deallocated, but that's a decision for the CVTA to make, if should that occur. But we went through several iterations of this draft policy with the TAC. It's been we've been working on this for 6 or so months, I think. We ran it through the finance committee at least once, and got input, and then I believe this policy and this process will achieve your goals. Should we run into issues in the future when we're going through this process, should that occur, then it's just a policy. You can adjust the policy. This is not written in stone. It's a policy that you all are adopting and you can change. So it's, it is subject to that.
Thank you.
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir. Mr. Moyer.
This deals with the regional money, not the county's money that comes off.
That's
Okay.
correct. That's correct.
So that's a regional project,
That's correct.
really doesn't have a jurisdiction involved in it.
The jurisdictions apply for the funds to
Okay,
start.
but then we as a region approve it. So to get to the self-deallocation, I would think that would need approval by the board also. If we think it's a regional project
That's correct.
and they come back and say, we're not gonna do this, well, we think it's a regional project, I think we should do that.
Yeah, there's a scenario, when I said self-deallocation, they would not have unilateral authority.
But I'm just making sure of that.
Self-identifying, if that's.
Well, we appreciate they come and say that,
Right,
but
yeah, say,
if
hey.
it's something if the region needs, we could come back and say, let's think about that again.
But you can't force a jurisdiction to proceed with a project if the jurisdiction doesn't
I
want
guess
it.
not, I guess you could you, yeah, but.
So, Mr. Chair, so you really, we just went through this with the TPO down at Crater, right? So they had a project that was not getting matching funds, and they had a policy in place, just an automatic deallocation, which means that the jurisdiction didn't even have an option to try and get additional funding. We changed that and basically said, this is not fair to that jurisdiction. They should at least have an opportunity to come up with end of year dollars, to shift some of their own local CVTA dollars if it's that important a project. And the whole goal here, and I think we've achieved it, is to put a process in place that makes it go through a review process before the whole CVTA. And then we can actually say, look, for example, I have a project in my jurisdiction, it's the Wood Lake Otterdale widening, right? In the first round, we went through, we put 20 million towards it, and it didn't get enough smart scale funding. I came back and asked, and CVTA increased the funding for that, and we'll see how it does with the next round. But truth of the matter is, if it comes back out of smart scale and they say, well, sorry, dude, we're not gonna give you the money, then I got a choice. I gotta try and find another way to do it, or I come back and ask for more money. But I'm hoping that, and Bob's your uncle, that it'll get funded, But that's really what we're trying to do, is instead of saying, well, you're automatically out, is to have a legitimate process to bring it back forward and through. And the truth of the matter is, the locality after the first round should do what we did and say, all right, we saw how we did on smart scale, we didn't quite put enough money towards the matching. Let me ask the CVTA for more dollars, or let us throw some in from our other side to send the project forward. So I think this is good, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Any further comments? Any input?
I do, I have a question about
Yes,
this,
ma'am.
the 4-year,
Cousins, yes, ma'am.
thank you, the 4-year clock, so when that starts. So in this section where you talk about following the award of regional funding, if the project sponsor is not able to obtain full funding through leverage resources, and then it lists these 4 options. So does the 4-year clock start when when the CVTA allocates the funds, or is it like at the sort of beginning of these, when these options start.
It's a great question. We kind of went back and forth on that, and I'll ask Mr. Parsons to speak on it, but we did kind of look at that. I think from a fiscal standpoint, when the funds were allocated and marked for that project, because they're then, noted that they're not to be used for anything other than that project. To me, it seems like that would kind of start the 4-year mark, because we've taken a fiscal action. But I'll ask Mr. Parsons to speak on that, because that question did come up. Thank you, Delegate.
That's exactly right, Mr. Chair. After every round of regional funding, this body takes official action on an allocations plan, which lays out which year over the next 6 to 8 years the different portions of funding will be applied to that project from the regional fund. And I think when the authority takes that action and signs off on the allocations plan, that's when the clock starts.
Okay.
Thank you, ma'am. Anything further? Very well. I'll recognize Mr. Spoonhour for a potential motion as it's still on the finances.
Thank you. Mr. Chair, I would appreciate if we could get this passed and move that we move this to approval.
We have a motion and a second to approve the regional funding deallocation policy as presented. All those in favor, please indicate by saying aye, and we'll do a roll call vote. Ms. Scott?
Mr. Hodges.
Aye.
Mr. Atkins.
Aye.
Mr. Carroll.
Aye.
Mr. Spoonhour.
Aye.
Chair Davis.
Aye.
Reverend Nelson. Mr. Moyer.
Aye.
Mayor Stoney.
Aye.
Delegate Cousins.
Aye.
Senator Hashmi.
Aye.
And Mr. Davis.
Aye.
Thank you, that motion carries.
The record reflect the motion carries. Next item on the agenda is amended item B3, Fall Line Trail Management. We'll look at the resource guide, page 68, Mr. Parsons.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, page 68 is the staff report, and following on page 69 is the resource guide in full. So essentially, the background is that the Technical Advisory Committee has been working on scrutinizing, obsessing over the fall line since the first commitment was made back in 2021 by this authority. And we've really moved the TAC over time because of how important and critical this trail is going to be for the region, has moved away at times from focusing on the funding to more focusing on the success of the network. And that has at least over the past 9 to 12 months gone the way of talking about management of the trail and how that can best be achieved so that the investment that the CVTA has made is realized fully and continues to be a great resource and access point for the community. That being said, the TAC, I think, smartly has decided that it has done what it can do and has utilized the expertise of the Fall Line Work Group, which has been meeting diligently monthly for the past few years to understand all of the different intricacies of what a management scenario for a trail like this might look like. And at this point, what is being presented to you is a resource guide for all of the different components, considerations, history of good trail management in terms of what might be useful for future consideration when VDOT considers individual segments and how to best continue making sure that the fall line is utilized to the best of its ability. So what is included in this resource guide is background on what the CVTA has done and what the TAC has considered. It looks at an outline of potential responsibilities for trail management on a regional scale. feedback from members of the Fall Line Work Group, specifically the Virginia Capital Trail Foundation and sports backers. Both provided detailed feedback on what should be considered in regional trail management. A compendium of existing management agreements. That's going to be critical to how this management moves forward. So what we've included in here is the MOA for the Virginia Capital Trail between the foundation and VDOT. So that's included for a great resource guide for an existing regional trail that really functions well and might be a useful tool. There is also a memorandum of agreement for the Fall Line Trail between VDOT and Henrico County, which is more recent and is focused on the Fall Line and might be a good model MOA for other jurisdictions to consider when working with VDOT on making sure that the trail is maintained. And then a report that was commissioned in 2019 by the Secretariats of both Transportation and Natural Resources through the General Assembly on Virginia Capital Trail sponsorship and maintenance. So that's a report that has been approved by the General Assembly and might be a great resource for localities or other regional organizations to consider. And then finally, the Fall Line Trail, there's a white paper in there that was prepared by Plan RVA staff that takes a look at other successful regional organizations and foundations in terms of how they approached trail management in similar situations, and looks at things like other successful trails, the Great Allegheny Passage in Pennsylvania, Maryland, the Great Trails State Coalition in North Carolina, the Path Foundation in Atlanta, et cetera, et cetera. Again, additional resources that might be useful. So, where are we with the staff report and the work of the CVTA? At its regular meeting on November 4th, the members of the CVTA TAC voted unanimously to recommend that the authority accept the report titled Fall Line Trail Management, a Resource Guide. So that is what is on your agenda today, a motion to accept this report and make it publicly available for member jurisdictions, for VDOT, and for other organizations to consider as these questions continue to be answered moving forward.
Very well. Are there any questions? If you look under 2.3, the sponsorship and maintenance report is in there, I think. And again, that was drafted in 2020. Ask folks to just take a look. That's on page 73. Just gives an idea. Some of those things came up. I will say that the localities are one of the big items that came up in this. The localities assume maintenance responsibility, but not replacement costs for amenities. So I know some folks have talked about that. So that's in section 2.3. I think it's the third point under localities. And then there's some sub-points there that break out with James City and their MOU, the city and Henrico as it relates to mowing, debris removal, litter cleanup. VDOT also has a litter removal that came up with some mowing and tree removal, debris removal. So those are, while they seem small, they were a topic of discussion amongst folks, and I just want to make sure those were covered and addressed to the satisfaction of those representing their localities. While there's substantial larger items in there, that was something that came up as a topic of discussion. Anybody have any questions, any comments on this?
Mr. Chair,
Yes, sir, Ms.
as the owner of the first section of the Fall Line Trail to be completed and accepted, I did want to point out that the map that summarizes Fall Line maintenance responsibilities shows VDOT as having responsibility for that section that the town basically built with grants. Had a discussion with Mr. Riblet about the fact that we've had discussions with our VDOT residency about potentially maintaining that section, since we built it to standards that with concrete base that we felt was appropriate. So my first comment is the map should be modified to add the town of Ashland and to show that wonderful quarter mile that we built as potentially the town's responsibility. And my second question would be, so what do we do now? This is a report that we accept. What does that mean? And do we go to 2.3 and talk to who decides? I know we don't decide. I've made that clear. So what's the next step for us to clarify maintenance responsibility?
Thank you, Mr. Hodges. Yes, first of all, I think you should go to 2.3 and we'll discuss that. But before that, the map absolutely should be modified, and I'll ask Director Parsons to make sure that that is done post haste. You're absolutely correct. I believe 2.3 covers most of what the responsibilities are for each entity. You brought up certain things, obviously bridge crossing and inspections, you were talking about concrete. Obviously, VDOT's gonna be the primary maintenance provider, but I don't know that that's gonna answer your question in depth, and Mr. Parsons is whispering in my ear, I'm getting ready to turn it over to him. In 10 seconds, if you will, but yeah, it's a 52-mile agreement, as you know, and every quarter mile is absolutely important. So, Mr. Parsons, you wanna cover some of this for Mr. Hodges to his satisfaction?
Yes, sir, and that's a great question, Mr. Hodges. I think that this pivot point at this point in time is necessary because CVTA is not set up to manage a trail. And I think that expertise falls more to individual agreements between localities and VDOT to start. And maybe at some point there is an additional discussion to be had for some type of a regional focus. But I think the initial approach should be something similar. I'm not an expert. Could be something similar to what Henrico and VDOT have put in place for the fall line specifically in Henrico's section. So that is included, as I said, as potential model language, but I think that's where we are.
So we should follow up with VDOT.
Yes.
That's my suggestion. I see Mr. Todd shaking his head.
Glad to have that conversation, yes.
Thank you, Mr. Todd.
Does that answer your question? Just
Yes, it
satisfaction?
does.
Very well, thank you, Mr. Hodges. And I will add, yeah, the Henrico VDOT model is a great tool, could be a great resource. So thank you for that, and thank you, Mr. Todd. Mr. Spoonhour.
Yeah, I was just gonna piggyback from Mr. Hodges' I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, but this pivot is really, we've asked the TAC to do some research. This kind of concludes their work in this. And they're saying, okay, now we can move on to other things, but they've done the yeoman's share of doing the research to see what our obligations would be, but now they're freed from this task.
I think that's a great summary, yeah.
Mr. Chair, before action, I did want, with your permission, I'd want to ask if Ms. Smith, Chair of TAC, wanted to
Sure.
add any additional comments.
Well, one thing that we always needed to stay focused on.
Ms. Smith, I'm so sorry, just, could I get you to stand there, just so we make sure we got you recorded? Thank you for that accommodation.
So one thing we needed to stay focused on when we had discussions on this topic was the difference between maintenance and management. So VDOT or localities, will be maintaining the trail. But this document, it does cover maintenance, but also focuses on management, which has to do more with the amenities, promoting the trail, coordinating maintenance, and events on the trail. But ultimately, we felt like it was a decision that each locality and trail owner needs to discuss together. So in Chesterfield, VDOT is the owner, but we're gonna have an active role in Chesterfield in talking about how we might supplement VDOT maintenance, or, you know, how we'll handle events on the trail. So it'll be a collaborative effort.
Yes, Mr. Hodges, please.
There was mention, based on what exists with the Capitol Trail, that goes through Charles City County, that there's a Capitol Trail Advisory Committee, basically. So for the management aspects, not the maintenance, it seems that there might be a regional way to deal with that rather than piecemealing it.
Yeah, there could be, and the document does talk about different options and how different trails in the state or in other areas have handled management. And that came up with our working group. You know, we've got the Appomattox River Trail with FOLAR, Capitol Trail, we'll have the Fall Line Trail, so we're getting a regional network. So it might be a consideration to think about it in a big picture way instead of individually.
And again, as it's been made clear, it's not our decision. It sounds like it's an individual jurisdiction. We're the owner of our section. So somehow, someone has to initiate this regional body or collaboration. How do we do that?
Yeah, I think with the Capitol Trail Foundation, that was initiated through, was that General Assembly or to promote the funding of it? There was initiative to form the foundation, and that was, I think, really outside of the jurisdictions.
Well, we
So
would
I
be
could-
supportive of something, some coordination, us, Hanover County, Henrico,
And maybe it's a discussion between county administrators, together to think about it as a regional, issue.
I would just say, Mr. Chairman, however it is, I think it would be better if we had a regional approach as opposed to individual jurisdictions negotiating something different. If there's one management body, whoever that is, sports backers or Capitol Trail Foundation.
Yeah, noted, and we'll have that in the minutes, and it's very poignant, Ms. Barnes.
I was just gonna say, I don't see Ms. Schickel in the room, but being where we are, it may be prudent to talk about it at the TPO or at Planner VA to consider options for that kind of regional collaboration.
Mr. Chair.
That would be great.
Thank you, Mr. Carroll.
I mean, obviously, there's several ways to go about this, but the truth of the matter is that the 5 jurisdictions that this touches are in this room. And so CVTA, we could consider the chair forming a committee to address with this issue based that is made up of and comprised of the 5 jurisdictions that it touches. And then they could sit in a room and figure it out.
That is an option. I'm gonna ask Mr. Parsons to get with TPO and Plan RVA, ask if they'll make that an agenda item. And then reach out specifically, instead of just corporately with an agenda, to individuals, Mr. Hodges, as well, and make sure that he's aware of that meeting. And those are discussions that we probably should have. I think those are great points, and we get those on those agendas. I think both of them.
Yeah, the reason I recommended this committee is because the people who serve in the CVTA are different than the people who serve in the TPO.
No question, and let me clarify, that was not a push to the TPO or Plan RVA, that was in addition to discussions here. So absolutely, it was a comprehensive approach. I didn't mean to give the impression that the CVTA would not entertain that. I think it's definitely something we should look at. This was in addition, so thank you for allowing me to clarify. Mr. Winters.
Mr. Chairman, so we're headed towards some degree of consistency.
Trying to.
So we don't want to run the risk of Chesterfield maintaining, looking different than any other part of it.
I think that's a great point.
Is that right? That makes a heck of a lot of sense.
Just one other, item. There are 2 other localities not as part of CVTA that are impacted by the Fall Line Trail, so we need to make sure that those are included, and that's the city of Colonial Heights and the city of Petersburg, just for awareness, so.
Very well. Thank you for that. Any further discussion?
Because, sorry, one other item, to Mr. Winfrey's comment. We do have an adopted wayfinding plan. that outlines consistent signage, directionals, information, all of that type of trail-specific kind of appearance stuff. So that does provide consistency, but it does not address
Right.
the off-trail amenities, resources, all the other things that each jurisdiction is going to be considering.
Yeah, and I think that more addresses what Mr. Winfrey was saying, so thank you for bringing that up. Very good point.
Just a quick question about that.
Yes,
The plan, does the plan also include consistency in the materials that are being used to construct the trail? And I'm asking because I'm thinking about, like materials that reduce stormwater runoff as we're thinking about the health of the James River.
Yes, it does. The wayfinding plan doesn't, but there is a VDOT report that was put together as a result of the initial study
Okay.
that does outline all those technical specifications.
Delegate, would you like a copy of that report?
Yes, please.
Okay, I'll make sure we
Thank you.
get that to you. Thank you. I guess Mr. Todd can get it to you, but I can't direct him to do that, but I can ask Mr. Parsons to communicate with Mr. Todd. Thank you, Mr. Todd. It's very responsive.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am, my pleasure. Anything further? Hearing none, is there a motion to accept the report titled Fall Line Trail Management, a resource guide as presented? We'll do a voice vote. Is there a motion?
So would it be as amended?
As amended, well, accept is the amended.
Okay, sorry.
So move, Mr. Chairman.
We have a motion by Mr. Hodges. Is there a second?
Second.
Second, ma'am. Second by Mr. Boyer. Is there any discussion? All those in favor by voice vote, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Next item on the agenda is item C2, the CVTA or TAC update. Ms. Smith, if you're still with us, thank you, ma'am.
So, I'm here to give you an update on the Technical Advisory Committee. We're continuing to review and update the regional framework document. We're taking a closer look at the transit category scoring and have formed a subcommittee that'll collaborate on that and bring some options back to the Technical Advisory Committee in December. We discussed the use of CVTA regional dollars for preliminary engineering and studies. The framework document suggests caps on how much CVTA regional is used towards PE only in studies. And we discussed whether those caps should be increased or adjusted in some way. And there were pros and cons, so having projects that can advance more quickly to construction is a benefit for future bonding. But investing regional dollars into the design of projects without an identified source for construction is a disadvantage. So pros and cons. In the end, we decided to leave the document as is because the language is flexible. But we did decide that we are going to discuss ways to prepare large-scale regional projects for future bonding. So that'll be on our agenda. We talked about the Fall Line Trail long-term management document that you all just discussed. And there was no Fall Line Trail working group meeting, but we'll resume next month to discuss strategies for getting the remaining sections funded and for ensuring that there's a good fund source for the future maintenance of the trail. Are there any questions?
Any questions from Ms. Smith? Thank you, ma'am. Any questions from Ms. Smith?
Thanks.
Very well. Thank you, ma'am. Agency reports, we have Plan RVA TPO, there will be found on page 131 of your agenda. Do we have anybody here that would like to give an oral update? Those are for your reading pleasure. Any comments from CVTA members? Yes, ma'am.
So I just wanted to take some time, if you had not heard this week, that we actually have a new director that started this week with us. I have to be clear, her name is Tiffany Robinson, so please do not get the two of us confused by any means, but she comes formerly from the governor's office as their deputy chief of staff. She's also had experience in Maryland. We are very excited to see her join us at DRPT, which means that our acting director, Zach Trogdon, is back to being our chief of public transportation. Our intent is to give her some time to be able to acclimate and get used to her role, and then I'll be glad to either myself or Zach come and bring her to CVTA so that you all may have the opportunity to meet her in the next couple months.
Great, well, thank you very much. So we call down there and just say Tiffany authorized it and we'll be good.
One of us will respond to that.
Thank you so much, Mr. Minsky. Any other CVTA comments? I will say this, we obviously had, elections that took place, we'll have, City of Richmond, had an election, we'll have a new mayor. I was glad to see, an application for employment, with the name Stoney in Hanover.
Really?
So, but, know that Mayor Stoney's hitting out. Thank you for your service here at CVTA. Are there any other comments, anything? We do have a joint annual meeting that hopefully is on your calendar. Hearing none, the time is 10:25 and we are adjourned.